Writing a book entitled Satiety per Calorie that's supposed to be this giant overview of how successful diets work in general. And then I'm working with the guys at Diet Doctor, Dr. Andreas Einfeld. Diet Doctor spun off this new company called Hava, Hava, and we're building an app and a system and a product that's basically looking at satiety per calorie and helping people evaluate their dietary quality for satiety per calorie and then possibly tweak that upwards a little bit. So the goal is to, eat to satiety and automatically eat a little bit less calories. If you look at the Adventist health studies, you take the vegetarian Adventists and the pescatarian Adventists, and they have better outcomes if they're eating fish. So it can't just be elimination of meat, right? So it would be a mistake to say, well, eat less meat, you're going to live longer. No, I think you nailed it. I mean, they're living in these mountainous regions with just very high step counts, very high activity levels, lots of social connection, a lot of purpose, a lot of just built-in happiness with quality of life. And then on the diet side, they're mostly just eating real food, some sort of local, seasonal, real food, and not, basically Twinkies or whatever. And so you're right. It is this nice little combination of factors. There are certain factors that are at play, but there's no one particular pattern that anybody has to eat. There's no one, which really fits all of our scientific data where, low fat works, low carb works, high protein works, paleo works, Mediterranean works, higher fiber works, lower energy density works. These all work, and it's kind of liberating because you don't have to religiously or dogmatically follow any of these things, and you can kind of zoom out and look at the big picture. And then you can also look at, even beyond diet into exercise factors and lifestyle factors and other things. And you have so many levers available to you. You can kind of pick and choose which ones you want to focus on, or maybe a little bit of all of them. I wrote this book, The PE Diet, just looking at protein percent, and it's the single most powerful metric when it comes to ad lib caloric intake for like humans, animals, or anything else. And so protein is this giant big deal. But what I realized is that if you look at different populations and different outcomes, you don't have to eat a high protein percent diet to be successful. It's just like plants versus animals. There are plenty of groups out there, the Okinawan and the Samane, and all these groups are eating, 12% of protein, 15% protein, great outcomes because they're pulling other levers that are also powerful, like lower energy density foods and higher ratio of fiber to non-fiber carbohydrate. And they're basically doing other things that improve satiety per calorie and nutritional density versus caloric density. And so protein is just one of these levers. It happens to be the biggest one, it happens to be my favorite one. I'm super biased, and I wrote a whole book about it. I've basically come to this place where there are so many different levers you can pull and you look at and focus on. And what you want to do is be aware of all of them and pull all of them a little bit and pick and choose. And you get to do whatever you want, kind of, as long as the area under the curve with all the levers you're pulling is sufficient. And it's very liberating. And that's something I really changed my mind on. It's like you don't have to focus on just protein. You don't have to focus on just plants or animals. You don't have to focus on just carbs or fats. You can just kind of step back and look at all of these together, kind of integrate them all. You know what I mean? Still recommend, while there are many factors that influence satiety per calorie and basically the ad lib caloric intake of people, you still want to prioritize protein because you want the highest lean mass at the lowest fat mass. That's your ultimate goal, and so you want as much bone and muscle as you can get. And so I still love protein. I still focus on protein. I still think that's the biggest pillar of all. And in satiety per calorie, I am also focusing on protein as the most important lever. It's the biggest one, the most powerful one. And for overall body composition, the one people should be looking at the most. And so, yes, I'm absolutely still all about the protein. I've just kind of broadened my view a little bit where that doesn't have to be the only thing you focus on. But yeah, definitely 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight is like a bare minimum for me. And that does seem to be all you need for optimal muscle synthesis. However, there are reasons to go higher than that if your goal is fat loss, and that's mostly to improve satiety per calorie. And there's fairly good evidence that going higher than that improves satiety per calorie. So for fat loss, so most people are in your community are probably looking at protein in terms of gaining muscle. But
Hmm.
I think going even higher is probably more important when it comes to fat loss and satiety per calorie, independent of building more muscle, like going up to 2.2 grams per kilo of ideal body weight. You're not going to build more muscle, but you might very well eat fewer calories on an ad lib diet eating to satiety. In fact, you probably will. So there are reasons to go up on protein percentage just for fat loss. So you always have
Damn it.
lower satiety drinking liquids. So the more you have to chew something, the higher the satiety per calorie. It's called oral processing time. But if you have to
Mm.
chew something like 1,000 times, you're going to get way more satiety per calorie than if you can just drink it in 10 seconds. So you will always get higher satiety per calorie eating a solid food versus liquid one. And in fact, there's this whole gradient of surface hardness of foods where if you're trying to eat like a walnut before you've cracked the shell, that's going to give you the most satiety per calorie. But then just something like this, just pure liquid, is going to be lower. And the higher the viscosity, like a gel is more satiating than a liquid, and and a semi-solid is more satiating than a gel, and then a harder and harder and harder solids are going to be even more satiating. And it's all about this chewing time and oral processing and gastric processing, and anything that is harder to digest and slows down the process gives you higher satiety for the calories involved. So a whey shake is not as good as eating real food. However, it's super convenient and it's way better than not having that protein. So that's all on a spectrum as well. Like if you're in a hurry and you're trying to have some protein with your first meal, yeah, drink a protein shake. It's going to be way better than, not eating anything, being too hungry later, and then just eating some, you know, lower protein, whatever. So I do like whey shakes. I do like protein powder. It's just good to know that it's not quite as good as a solid food. However, you don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good.
Mm.
So whey shakes are good. Protein powder is good.
Is that correct?
Absolutely, hell yes. We have a number
Okay.
of studies on this. If you drink a protein shake 3 times a day, half an hour before your meal, you'll automatically eat, over 300 calories less that day
Wow.
just on an ad
That's
lib diet.
significant.
Yes, it is significant. It is absolutely worth your time. You will meal replacement shakes, protein preloads with whey shakes. We have studies on all of this, and people literally just eat less downstream. So it is definitely worth your time. You have to do it before though. Like if you just eat to satiety of just junk food, you just had as many chocolate chip cookies as you want, and then you try to stuff a whey shake on top of that. It's really not going to help you out at all thing. And that's what I tend to use. And I like to give recommendations based on your height because we don't necessarily know otherwise what an ideal body weight is for someone. Sure, absolutely. You can just look up, you can just Google, reference weights for height. In
Mhm.
the book, what I use is for men, you for 5 feet tall, you give basically men 110 pounds for the first 5 feet, and then 5 pounds for every inch above that. So if you're a 5 foot tall male, the ideal body would be 110. If you're 5'1", it would be 115. If you're 5'2", it would be 120. For women, it's just 100 pounds at 5 feet, and then also 5 pounds for each additional inch. So 5 foot woman would be 100 pounds. 5'1" would be 105. 5'2" would be 110. I love it. Yes, please. I'll take some. That's good. But it's certainly not. I mean, the satiety per calorie is fairly low because it's a high energy density. It's a high fat product. It's a sweetened product that's high in fat and high energy density, and it also sweetened. So you're definitely going to eat more hedonically. Tasty, delicious, love it, go for it. I think it's way better though than just like really cheap milk chocolate. This is a perfect example of how if you look at the satiety per calorie score, dark chocolate's way better than your just cheap um, Hershey's bar type very high sugar, much lower quality milk chocolate. I think that body composition is equals metabolic health almost completely. So looking healthy and being healthy is very, very much overlap to the point of almost being identical. And that's, when you get to the extremes of bodybuilding, that's definitely not true. Where all these, super thin people feel like they're going to die. But for the most part, looking good and being healthy internally, metabolically, is so much overlap that it's almost the same thing. And a lot of people don't agree with me. They're like, oh, well, you could be really healthy and look overweight, or you could be look really healthy, but inside you're not. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I don't really agree with that. That would definitely make them just as insulin sensitive as someone who didn't. But you would probably have other downstream health impacts, such as degenerative joint disease of the large weight-bearing joints. You're going to have way more osteoarthritis of the hips and knees in someone who weighs a lot more than ideal, even if they have really good insulin sensitivity because they have such a high personal fat threshold. So I still think there might be some downsides to that. Although from an insulin sensitivity point of view, yes, if you have a really high personal fat threshold, you could look a lot fatter than someone who didn't and actually be healthier from a metabolic. The single most important factor of all when it comes to the obesity epidemic is satiety per calorie of your food choices. I believe that. I can't prove it yet, but I really believe that's what it comes down to. And I believe that a lot of the exercise differences we see between obese and non-obese persons are downstream of that. And the way I think that works is that, let's say all of a sudden you start choosing foods that are low in satiety per calorie. So you're just automatically overeating calories all day, every day, day in, day out. And you're getting a larger and larger and larger body size. As your body size goes up, the amount of energy you have to expend just to be alive goes up as well, because your basal metabolic rate is most related to body size, and most of your energy expenditure is basal metabolic rate. So basically you have to expend more and more energy to just sit on the couch with a larger body. And then you automatically exercise less because of constrained energy. And, everyone has a constrained energy system going on where you don't want to expend too much energy. So you're just going to automatically move less as you get a larger body. And so I think that trying to blame the obesity epidemic on, oh, well, we're just all exercising less than we used to. It's probably the food first. I think you consume these low satiety per calorie foods, you automatically eat more, you get a larger body size. You want to move less due to a constrained energy model. And then you've got people who just eat a lot of calories and don't expend a lot of calories with physical activity. And I think you can reverse all that by just simply choosing foods with higher satiety per calorie. You automatically eat fewer calories, you automatically have a little smaller body size, and then you're going to automatically exercise more just to have the same calorie burn. And so personally, I think the entire epidemic really comes down to food choice and satiety per calorie. And that's something that I can't prove, like I said, yet, but that's my universal theory. Now, that's not to say you couldn't drive things in reverse. You could just force yourself to do a huge volume of exercise. And when you do that, you start matching your intake to your expenditure much, much better. And you would basically burn up all the extra calories you're eating from the low satiety per calorie food choices. And you wouldn't overeat because you're matching intake to expenditure better. So you could reverse the whole process with just exercise alone. It would just be
A lot
harder and
Yeah.
a little bit steeper uphill battle. I'm just saying for the average person, I think the diet issue comes first and is more prominent. But you could unwind your whole obesity problem with just exercise alone, just by doing huge volumes of cardio and caloric burn. I think that is absolutely possible. I basically demand that everyone does resistance training. I'll literally write it down as a prescription. Like, you have to do resistance training at least twice a week, full body, push pull legs twice a week, full body. I know people in the high intensity crowd would argue that once a week is plenty, or maybe once every 2 weeks. But I think most of my Gen Pop clients or patients, if you want to call them that, cannot produce the intensity required to just to get where you want to go with one week. You know what I mean? So I'm like at least twice a week, full body, push pull legs, and I definitely see like massive improvements. So like I've had patients who were their diabetes was just steadily getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And as soon as they start doing resistance training and really get into it and really embrace it, and being very formal about it, you know, some people are like, well, yeah, I try to do some push-ups here and there. And I'm like, no, you're gonna map it out. You're gonna have a structure. You're gonna have a schedule. You're gonna have, you know, 2 particular times a week. You're gonna have certain exercises that are gonna hit these different movement patterns, these muscle groups. And when people really do that, always all your diabetic and insulin sensitivity markers get better just immediately. We see lower, you know, fasting glucose, fasting triglycerides, fasting insulin, A1C, all these things get better. You know, typically every single thing you can measure improves. And so resistance training is huge. It's an absolute requirement. I pretty much demand it out of everyone. And what the biggest problem with diabetes is that your number one glucose disposal organ is your skeletal muscle. And when people are, I have a lot of people with this like super bad skinny fat, like normal weight obesity, where you're so sarcopenic and osteopenic that your weight's okay, but you're just extremely fluffy. You just have tons of fat and hardly any lean mass. And these people have brutal diabetic problems. They just can't get their blood sugar down at all until they start building muscle. And then they get so much more insulin sensitive at the muscle level that blood sugar just goes way down, and it's huge, it's massive, and I pretty much demand it of everybody. So yeah, resistance training is absolutely critical. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. Everyone has to do it, and I basically demand it of everyone who walks in the door. So it's typically a fairly slow process of building muscle, like really slow. But because when people are doing these workouts to failure, they're depleting so much intramuscular triglyceride and glucose, you will see insulin sensitivity improvements like, you know, within a week or two. I'll have patients with a Freestyle Libre sensor and they're just tracking all their blood sugars and they're horribly diabetic. And as soon as they start working out, you can just literally see a drop in their overall, the baseline of their glucose curve on their glucometer, it will just be lower very rapidly. I mean, I would say within a week or two. And that's before they've even built any muscle at all. You're just depleting muscular fuels. So to really be diabetic, you have to have all three of your storage depots completely full. All your fat cells have to be full, and you're spilling fat out of your subcutaneous cells into the bloodstream, and your triglycerides are high, into visceral fat. Your liver has to be completely full. 100% of type 2 diabetics have fatty liver, full stop. By definition, to be diabetic, you have to fill up your fat cells, fill up your liver, and have your muscle filled with fuel as well, so that your skeletal muscle cells are not accepting more fat or glucose. So you have to fill up all three storage depots to be severely diabetic and have hyperglycemia: muscle, liver, and fat cells. And the second you deplete one of those, your blood sugar comes way down. You could just fast and not eat for a day or two. Liver glycogen and triglyceride comes down. Your fatty liver is better, and your diabetes is better. You're less diabetic. You could just do a couple of glycogen depletion workouts, and all of a sudden your muscle has more storage room, and your blood sugar comes way down. The fat loss is the hardest part. Like actually shrinking down all your fat cells takes, you know, weeks. But even there, we'll see these studies where people go on crash diets and, you know, just 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, bariatric surgery, low energy diets, these 800 calorie formula diets, anything you do where you also shrink down your fat cells very rapidly, your diabetes just collapses and just goes away. So fixing any one of these storage depots is massive, and resistance exercise does that for skeletal muscle. Not only is it depleting these fuels and giving you immediate improvements, but over the long term, you're getting more and more muscle. So you have a bigger storage depot and better disposal. And now you can burn way more glucose when you're doing the workouts. And so it just spirals upwards. You get more and more insulin sensitive. You get a bigger and bigger storage depot in your muscle. And eventually you're just not diabetic at all. It is amazing. And exercise is the fastest way to be healthier. Like if you're trying to cure your diabetes, exercise is the very fastest way. I mean, on the diet side, the fastest you can go is just not eating. But you can always ramp up exercise volume and intensity and frequency and it just burn more and more calories and dispose of more and more fuel. So exercise is the fastest. It's definitely, if you're like, okay, I got to be healthier right now, tomorrow, yesterday, exercise is going to get you there the fastest. You know, I used to be like, which is more important, diet or exercise? Diet or exercise? It really is just like straight down the middle. You cannot say one of them's more important than the other. Honestly, if you put a gun to my head and made me choose one or the other, diet or exercise, I would probably go with exercise.
Wow.
I hate to say it. Yep. But it's really 50-50, and you just really want to be, thinking about both of them. Yeah, no, it's really, you can blame it on your kids entirely. What, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And these kids are basically naive to every virus on the planet, and they will just steadily get every single viral respiratory illness one after another in daycare. And that's their job right now, is to get every single virus and make antibodies against it. And so the virus vector load from these kids is off the charts. And basically every doctor in training will tell you that when they did their peds rotations in medical school or whatever, they were just sick the whole time. That's certainly happened to me. Having kids under the age of 4 is really just a marathon of sleep deprivation. You're lucky to be alive. And then your diet is garbage. Like, you're basically just living off whatever scraps your kids don't eat. So you're just like, crumbs from goldfish crackers is like your entire diet when you have kids that age. Like, I didn't exercise ever when I had kids, under the age of like 3. So like I have a standing desk at work. I don't even have a chair in my office. I'm literally just standing all day long. I only sit down when I'm talking to a patient if they're sitting down. I have, in case the weather's bad, I've got a, Peloton in my garage. I got a Concept 2 rower. I got a treadmill. I've got like things right there where I can do my cardio in the house. I've got, pull-up bars. I've got dumbbells. I've got barbells. I've got free weights. I've got, anything I need to do resistance training at home right there. Anything I need to do cardio if the weather's bad right there. I'm building all this stuff into my day just automatically,
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I have it planned out. I know when I'm going to work out. I know what, roughly what workouts I'm going to do. And the more of this I've set up externally, the easier it is to just be compliant, and consistency is everything. So if you can just be consistent most of the time, it's just so much easier. You know what I mean? And if I was just kind of going meal to meal and not really knowing what I was going to do for food, what I was going to do to exercise, it would be so much harder. It would be really, really order of magnitude more difficult. So you have to make it easy. You have to make it almost easier to do the good stuff than the not as good stuff. Right. Yeah. So I wrote a book called The PE Diet, and you can find it anywhere online books are sold. Amazon or whatever, or you can go to thepediet.com or tednaiman.com and buy a PDF copy of it, which is a lot less expensive. So I recommend that. And then you can find me on social media at Ted Naiman. You mostly, I guess, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at Ted Naiman. I'm working with Dr. Andreas Einfeld and the Diet Doctor team on Hava, and the website there is hava.co. Or you can go to satietypercalorie.com and see a little teaser there. But we're working on this app that helps people evaluate food in terms of satiety per calorie, looking at all these different levers.